I'm researching the openings of successful novels to learn how to write the all-important first chapter of my own book. Today, I'll begin a two-part look at prologues, starting with A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. Rather than try to set up the novel's complex, interwoven narrative, the prologue steps outside that narrative to focus on a simple but ominous action scene. That action creates tension that looms over the entire story, and the prologue also lays out the themes of the story through action. So let's open up A Game of Thrones and learn the art of the prologue. This is how the novel starts. A Game of Thrones doesn't begin with any of its now famous characters. It also doesn't weigh things down with the Tolkien approach of explaining everything up front. Don't get me wrong, it has some of the same indulgences that Tolkien was famous for. For example, there's a map, which is a signal to the reader that this is a real fantasy novel, trademark. And like Tolkien's work, the book ends with an appendix. It's a history of the main families of this continent. But Martin goes in a different direction than Tolkien, and the prologue announces that loudly. It zooms in on a group of soldiers out on a patrol. They find the remains of an enemy tribe they've been tracking. The aristocratic commander, Waymar Royce, berates the other two soldiers under him, Will and Garrett, for their apparent ineptitude. The three of them soon come across a group of, well, how do we put this, intelligent zombies? These are the others. Until now, the others were only legends. The soldiers don't have time to investigate how these legends have become true, though. They're attacked by the others, brutally killed, and turned into new others. End of prologue. Next is the first proper chapter of the story. One of the soldiers of the prologue escaped and ran to a castle called Winterfell. There he explained his encounter with the others. The Lord of Winterfell, though, doesn't believe him. In fact, Lord Stark is convinced the soldier, who swore an oath to defend the kingdom, is using outlandish tales to cover the desertion of his post. The punishment for such desertion is death. That's our introduction to the larger world of Westeros, and to one of its major families, the Starks. We soon meet characters from other families, and eventually we're immersed in the title's Game of Thrones. It's the lethal struggle among those families for the throne of Westeros. So, against this sprawling Game of Thrones, what is the purpose of the prologue? Well, just like the Lannisters, most prologues play the long game. The goal is to set up a distant conflict and a huge payoff later in the novel, or in Martin's case, in several novels. As many writers would say, it's important to set these stakes up early, to explain the basics so the story makes sense. Thing is, no one wants to be presented a beautiful novel, then told by the author, look, before you read this, I first need you to read this instruction manual. Trust me, it'll all be worth it later. But why do we have to wait for later for it to be good? Why isn't the story good right now? That's why A Game of Thrones gives us instant gratification through mystery and action. A patrol encounters trouble, they fight with zombies, and then they die or escape. After the prologue, we're thrust into a huge number of intersecting storylines. They all unfold slowly over many chapters and take hundreds of pages to resolve. Maybe that's why, in contrast, the prologue works as a standalone piece, with its own beginning, middle, and end. There are only passing references to the historical, social, military, or magical characteristics we'll eventually learn about. That's because prologues aren't really for exposition or world building. That information should be presented organically throughout the story anyway. No, instead, the prologue is subtly foreshadowing the political struggle to come. A rough but sympathetic soldier is berated by his inexperienced, aristocratic commander. It's an underdog story, which naturally draws us to the side of the soldier. We want him to prove the truth to Commander Jerkface. But even after he does, we see another theme in action. In Westeros, no one lives long enough to enjoy victory. The prologue also shows us something the rest of the characters don't know, that the others aren't a fairy tale or a ghost story. They're real. That's something prologues can do well. They give readers knowledge the main characters wouldn't have access to, and then leave us with that dreadful knowledge for the entire story. The technical term for that knowledge is dramatic irony. It heightens the emotional impact of the story by making us feel anxiety and anticipation. In A Game of Thrones, our anxiety increases every time a character dismisses the signs of real trouble.
The Night's Watch protects the realm.
Ah, yes, yes. Against grumpkins and snarks and all the other monsters your wetness warned you about. You're a smart boy. You don't believe that nonsense.
We don't know what the others are doing or where they are. We just know they're out there. That anxiety about the others stays with us for hundreds of pages. We look forward to the moment when the characters catch up to us. And when the story ends, whether that's in triumph or disaster, we get immense satisfaction from telling the characters, "Man, I told you so." One of the recurring patterns in A Game of Thrones is a character's idealism being shattered by harsh reality. The first time that lesson is learned is right in the prologue, when the clueless commander comes face to face with another. But beyond that, our knowledge of the others means from the prologue onward, we know more than all the main characters do. None of them have any idea what's really going on.
Oh, my sweet summer child, what do you know about fear?
That dramatic irony further establishes the book's characters as clueless and naive. It turns the prologue from a simple scene for a new reader into a fundamental building block for the book's theme. That is a much deeper level of world building. It's not telling us that Westeros is made up of, 7 kingdoms or whatever. It's actually showing us a land of naive people who aren't prepared for what's on the horizon.
And winter is coming.
The opening of A Game of Thrones isn't the only way to do prologues. In the next episode, I'll look at a novel with a radically different approach, The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. Subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified as soon as that episode goes live.